She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes cold. "You can't stay here anymore. We have our own family to think about." My son stood behind her, silent, his face turned toward the floor. I had just lost my job, 42 years at the same plant, gone in one meeting. I wasn't asking for much. Just a few weeks to get back on my feet. I helped them buy this house. I built the nursery with my own hands. Now I was being told to leave like some unwanted guest. My son didn't even say goodbye when I walked out. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I wasn't born with much. Grew up in a 2-bedroom home with 5 siblings and a mother who worked her fingers to the bone. My father died young. I barely remember his face, just the smell of sawdust and tobacco. So when I had my own son, I swore he'd never know that kind of struggle. I'd be there, every step. And I was. God knows I tried. I worked in the same metal fabrication plant for over 4 decades. Started sweeping the floors at 17, stayed long enough to supervise the entire floor crew. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. Hard work. The kind that leaves your back sore and your hands rough, but it puts food on the table. And that table? It was full every night. My wife, Marjorie, made our house a home. She had a laugh that made the neighbors turn their heads and a temper that could melt the paint off the walls if she got going. But she loved deeply. Our boy, Jacob, was everything to her. And to me. First time I held him, I was terrified I'd drop him. He was so small. So fragile. But when he wrapped his fingers around mine, I felt a kind of strength I'd never known before. Jacob had the kind of smile that made you forget your troubles. When he was little, he'd run to the door when I got home, clutching some drawing or school paper, shouting, "Dad! Look what I did!" I still have some of those drawings in a box somewhere, little stick figures and hearts, misspelled words and all. Back then, he called me his hero. Back then, I felt like one. I never missed a birthday. I worked double shifts to afford that red bike he wanted for Christmas one year. Stayed up all night assembling the thing in the freezing garage, cursing at screws and handlebars, but when I saw his face the next morning, it was worth every blister. Marjorie used to say I spoiled him. Maybe I did. But after everything I missed growing up, spoiling my boy felt like justice. We didn't have a big house, but it was warm. Safe. Filled with stories, music, and love. On weekends, we'd go fishing at the lake. Jacob never caught much, he talked too much to stay quiet long enough, but those were our best days. Just the two of us and the water. When he got older, things started to change, naturally. Teenagers pull away. He got into music I didn't understand, stayed out too late, started rolling his eyes when I gave advice. But he was never cruel. Just distant. Marjorie said it was a phase. She always smoothed things over, her way of keeping peace in the house. And for the most part, she was right. College came, and we helped pay his tuition. He wanted to study architecture, said he wanted to build things that lasted. I was proud. Marjorie cried the day we dropped him off. I held her hand the whole ride back, even though mine was shaking too. That house felt so quiet after he left. He met Jessica in his 3rd year. She came from a well-off family, polished, always dressed like she was headed to a board meeting. She wasn't unkind, just cool. Polite, but always seemed like she was tolerating us. Marjorie said she had an air about her. I think she meant that in the nicest way possible. Still, we welcomed her. Set the table nice when they came to visit, made her favorite meals. I even gave up my recliner when she was pregnant with their first, so she could sit more comfortably. When they got married, we gave them $50,000 as a wedding gift. Marjorie and I had saved for years. I wanted them to have a good start. They used it for the down payment on their first home. I even helped paint the nursery, built shelves, baby-proofed the kitchen. I remember standing in that tiny room, sunlight pouring in through the window, thinking, this is what it's all for. This is the reward. Marjorie passed away just a year after Jacob's daughter was born. Breast cancer. Fast and cruel. One day she was baking cookies, the next she was too weak to stand. I held her hand every night in the hospital. The night she left, I kissed her forehead and told her I'd take care of our family. I kept that promise the best I could. I was still working at the plant, still showing up early, still saving. When Jessica went back to work, I offered to babysit. Took care of my granddaughter 3 days a week. Changed diapers, sang lullabies, even watched those silly cartoons over and over until I could recite them. It gave me purpose again. But as the years went by, the visits got shorter. The invitations less frequent. The warmth I used to feel in their home began to cool. I thought maybe it was just the passing of time. People get busy. But sometimes I'd catch a look in Jessica's eyes, like I was overstaying a welcome I never thought needed renewing. Still, I didn't ask for anything. Never asked them to pay me back. Never hinted at needing help. I was their father. Their foundation. That was my role. You give, you don't take. You support, even if you're crumbling a little inside. That's what Marjorie would have done. Looking back now, I wonder if maybe I gave too much. Maybe in trying to be the rock, I let myself be eroded. Maybe Jacob forgot who I was because I made it so easy to lean on me without ever asking for anything in return. But at the time, I didn't see it. I still thought I was part of their life. Still thought they saw me as family. I had no idea how quickly that would change, once I lost the one thing they still respected me for. My job. And when that went, so did everything else. The day I lost my job was quiet. Too quiet. No speeches, no gold watch, no handshake. Just a folded envelope from HR and a sympathetic nod from the foreman. 42 years gone in 5 minutes. They called it downsizing. I called it the end of everything I knew. I sat in the car for over an hour after that. Didn't even start the engine. Just sat there, staring at the wheel, trying to figure out how to go home and say it out loud, I'm not needed anymore. But there was no one to tell. Marjorie was gone. And the house, it felt colder than usual that night. After a few days of pacing around empty rooms and eating canned soup, I called Jacob. Told him what happened. I didn't ask for money, God, no. Just said I needed a place to land while I sorted things out. I expected maybe a few weeks. A couch, a warm meal. That's all. His pause on the phone should have told me everything. Dad, he said slowly, I'll have to check with Jess. Things are tight right now. Tight? In that 4-bedroom house with a finished basement and a backyard I helped landscape? Still, I swallowed my pride. I told him it'd only be temporary, just until I figured out my next step. I could hear Jessica in the background, her voice low, sharp. Then he came back and said, all right. Just for a little while. I packed light, just a few shirts, some toiletries, a framed photo of Marjorie. The night I arrived, Jacob didn't help with my bags. Jessica opened the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Oh, she said, you're here. They put me in the guest room downstairs. No towel on the bed. No space cleared in the closet. I felt like I'd shown up uninvited, not like a father who once paid their mortgage deposit. At first, I tried to keep to myself. Made my own breakfast, cleaned up after myself, stayed out of their way. But small things started adding up. Jessica would give me looks whenever I walked into the kitchen while she was cooking. Like I'd disrupted some sacred ritual. If I turned on the TV while their daughter was doing homework, she'd sigh loudly until I turned it off. And Jacob? He wasn't the boy who used to run into my arms. He'd come home from work, nod at me, and go straight upstairs. We used to talk about everything, his job, the news, old memories. Now it was like I was furniture. Worse, maybe. Something in the way. The worst part was my granddaughter. At first, she was thrilled to see me. "Grandpa's here," she'd shout, running into the room. But a week later, she started calling me Mr. Grandpa, in this weird, formal tone. I asked her where that came from. "Mommy says you're just visiting," she said. Just visiting. That hit me harder than I expected. I'd changed her diapers. Held her when she had nightmares. Now I was just some temporary guest. I started noticing more signs. Locked cabinets in the kitchen. Jessica started labeling the pantry shelves, breakfast items, school snacks, private. I pretended not to see it. Pretended I wasn't hurt. But inside, something small began to crack. One evening, I overheard them talking when they thought I was asleep. Jessica said, "He's here all day, using up electricity, eating our food. He's not even looking for work." Jacob mumbled something, then she snapped, "You said it was temporary. He needs to go." I lay in that cold basement room, staring at the ceiling, hands clenched into fists. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't lazy. I was just lost. For the first time in decades, I didn't know who I was anymore. I used to be a provider. A husband. A father. Now, I was some old man freeloading in his son's basement. Even small routines became uncomfortable. I'd make toast in the morning and feel Jessica's eyes on my back. One morning, the coffee machine was moved to their bedroom upstairs. When I asked Jacob why, he said, "Jess likes to have it close in the mornings." It was clear, they didn't want me there. But I wasn't ready to admit that. I made excuses. Told myself they were stressed, that it was just a phase. That it would pass. After all, families go through rough patches. Right? I started applying for jobs again. Night shifts, warehouse gigs, anything. But no one wanted a 67-year-old man with a bad knee and a rusty resume. Still, I kept trying. I wanted to prove I could stand on my own 2 feet again. Then came the day Jessica accidentally let it slip that the HOA had rules about long-term guests. "We could get fined," she said, staring at me across the dinner table. "They're really strict." Jacob said nothing. I asked him later if that was true. He shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe. She reads all that stuff." That night, I sat outside on their patio, watching the light fade from the sky. The house I helped them buy, the life I helped them build, it all felt so distant now. Like I was watching it through glass. That's when I noticed the key wasn't on the hook anymore. The spare I always used to let myself in. Gone. Just like that, I realized, they'd quietly decided I wasn't part of their home anymore. I was temporary. A guest. An inconvenience. And deep down, I began to wonder if they'd always seen me that way, and I just hadn't noticed. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. One of those late summer days when the sun hangs too long in the sky, and even the breeze feels tired. I had gone out to a job interview, warehouse night shift, unloading freight. My back was already sore just thinking about it. But I had to try. I had to prove I was still useful. When I came back to the house, the garage door was open. My old suitcase was sitting by the wall, next to a plastic bin with my name scrawled on masking tape. I blinked. Thought maybe Jessica was reorganizing. But as I got closer, I saw my shoes, my shaving kit, even the framed photo of Marjorie, all stacked like junk for a yard sale. I walked inside. The air was heavy, like something had just happened. Jessica was at the kitchen table, typing on her laptop. She didn't look up. "Hey," I said. My voice cracked a little. She closed the lid. "Jacob's not home yet." I saw my things in the garage. She took a breath, then stood, folding her arms. "We talked about this." "No," I said quietly. "You talked." I was never part of the decision. She looked past me, like I was already gone. "We can't keep doing this. It's not working." I didn't understand. "I've been quiet. I've stayed out of your way. It's not about that," she cut in. "We have a family to raise. We need our space. Our routine. It's been months, and there's been no progress. This isn't sustainable." There it was. The corporate tone. Like I was a budget item being trimmed. I looked toward the stairs, hoping Jacob would come down, step in, say something. But he wasn't there. Just silence. "When did you talk about this?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. "Last week. Behind my back." I walked toward the fridge, half on instinct, half to keep from shaking. There was a new chart taped to the door, some kind of chore schedule. My name wasn't on it. It used to be. I did the dishes. Took out the trash. Cleaned the gutters. I turned to her. "Where am I supposed to go?" She hesitated for just a moment. "We can help you get a motel. Short term. Just until you find something." That word again. Until. Always temporary. Always a foot out the door. "I gave you the down payment for this house," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "I held your baby while you went back to work. I fixed your damn fence after the storm." Her expression didn't change. Just that blank, practiced calm. "This is Jacob's decision too," she said. "He just didn't want to say it himself." I laughed. Bitter and low. "Of course he didn't." She started to walk past me, then paused at the door. "Please don't make this harder than it has to be." "Make it harder?" I was being evicted from my own son's house like a squatter. That night, he came home after dark. I was sitting on the back porch, suitcase by my feet. He walked out, hands in his pockets. "Dad," he said softly. I didn't look at him. "She's right. It's just, the energy in the house is tense. It's not good for the kid. For anyone. So I'm the problem now?" He winced. "Don't say it like that. You let her throw me out." "I didn't." "Yes, you did. By saying nothing." He sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. That same old gesture he used when he didn't want to face something. "I'll send you something," he said, quietly. "Money, I mean. Just until." "Don't," I cut him off. "Keep your money." He opened his mouth, but I was already on my feet. I couldn't stand to see him anymore. Not like that. Not after everything. I slept in the car that night. Drove to a gas station on the edge of town and parked under a dim light. I didn't cry. Not then. Just stared at the roof of the car and thought about Marjorie. How she would have handled this. How she would have lit into Jacob like a thunderstorm if she were still alive. The next morning, I checked into a cheap motel. The kind with buzzing lights and a front desk clerk who doesn't look you in the eye. I paid for 3 nights up front. That was all I could afford without dipping into what little retirement savings I had left. Sitting on that sagging mattress, I finally let the weight of it hit me. My son. My only child. The boy who used to ride on my shoulders at the county fair. The boy I stayed up with when he had the flu. The boy I taught to shave. He'd let me be thrown out like I was nothing. And what cut deeper than anything was the silence. No call. No message. No check-in. Just silence. I looked around that motel room, the brown-stained carpet, the humming air conditioner, the tiny TV bolted to the wall. This was my new home. And somewhere out there, in a house I helped build, with a yard I once mowed, my son was laughing with his wife and daughter, as if I'd never existed. That's when I stopped calling it a misunderstanding. That's when I finally admitted to myself, this wasn't neglect. It was betrayal. I didn't tell anyone where I went after that. Pride kept me quiet. The kind of pride you develop after a lifetime of swallowing disappointment and telling yourself you're fine. But I wasn't fine. Not even close. 3 nights turned into a week at the motel. I lived off microwaved noodles and black coffee. Days were long, nights even longer. I watched static-filled TV and stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me, wondering how it had come to this. One morning, I stopped by the old neighborhood to check my P.O. box at the post office. That's when I ran into Bill, a neighbor from 2 doors down back when I was living with Jacob. Retired Army guy, built like an oak tree even in his 70s. "Hey," he said, squinting like he wasn't sure it was really me. "You moved out?" I nodded. "Yeah. Just needed space." He raised an eyebrow. "Heard from Jessica that you chose to leave. Said you didn't want to burden them." I blinked. "She said that?" He nodded. "Heard it from my wife. Said you were thinking of relocating out of state." That lie cut deeper than any of the cold stares or silent dinners. Not only had they thrown me out, they were rewriting the story. Painting themselves as the generous ones. Turning me into the one who walked away. Later that day, I drove by the house. Not close, just far enough to see the roof, the porch I helped rebuild, the flower bed Marjorie planted. It looked peaceful. Like nothing had ever happened. Like I'd never been part of it at all. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer at first, but they left a voicemail. My curiosity got the better of me. It was a lawyer. "Mr. Bennett," the voice said, "this is regarding a pending inquiry initiated by Mrs. Jessica Bennett. It concerns potential access to your financial records and any prior agreements made in relation to the house at 83 Carver Lane. Please call back at your earliest convenience." I stood there in the motel room, phone in hand, cold spreading through my chest like a slow leak. What agreements? I hadn't signed anything. I called the number. They wouldn't tell me much, just that Jessica had contacted them to explore power of attorney options, and whether there had been any verbal promises of financial gifts tied to the property. My heart started racing. They were building a case. A paper trail. Something to legally tie me to obligations I never agreed to. Maybe even something to argue that I was no longer capable of managing my own finances. That night, I found myself staring at the photo of Marjorie on the nightstand. I used to keep it on the mantel back home. She was in her garden hat, holding a basket of tomatoes, smiling at me like I was the only man in the world. "I'm sorry, Marge," I whispered. I didn't see it coming. And then it hit me, maybe she had. Maybe the way Jessica always kept her distance wasn't just about personality. Maybe Marjorie had seen something in her that I hadn't. I remembered a night years ago, right after Jacob and Jessica got married. We were washing dishes, and Marjorie said quietly, "She's sharp, that one. Watch your wallet." I'd laughed it off back then. Thought she was just being overprotective. But now, those words rang in my ears like a warning I'd ignored. I began to think back to every small thing I'd dismissed. Like the time Jessica misplaced a check I gave them for home repairs and insisted I had never written it. Or when she offered to help me set up online banking and later asked for my password so she could manage things more efficiently. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. She was family. But now? Now, I saw it all differently. The next morning, I stopped by a diner on the edge of town. A little place I used to go with Marjorie for Sunday pancakes. The waitress, Linda, recognized me. "Long time no see, Mr. Bennett," she smiled. "Still babysitting that sweet granddaughter?" I shook my head. "Not anymore." I sat at the corner booth with a cup of coffee and a legal pad I bought at the gas station. I started making a list. Not of everything they'd done, no, that would take too long. I made a list of everything I still had. $28,000 in savings. A 2008 Ford with 180,000 miles. My wedding ring. My pension paperwork. My name on the deed of that house. Maybe, maybe not. I needed to check. And my will. Still untouched. I called the lawyer from the voicemail again and asked for copies of any inquiries made. They wouldn't give me details, but just hearing Jessica's name in a legal context made my stomach turn. This wasn't just neglect. It wasn't even just disrespect. It was a plan. A quiet, behind-the-back scheme to paint me as incompetent. To erase my sacrifices, twist my generosity into obligation, and, if they could, make sure I had no say in how anything was remembered. They wanted to write the story their way. But I wasn't dead yet. From that day forward, I started paying attention differently. I stopped thinking like a father trying to forgive his son and started thinking like a man protecting what little dignity he had left. Every document, every message, every detail, I filed them away, quietly. They thought I was old. They thought I was done. But I had just begun to wake up. Speech balloon. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I wasn't raised to make noise. Men in my generation, we don't go shouting about our pain. We don't cry at tables or demand apologies. We keep our heads down. We endure. But even stone wears down under a steady drip. It started with a trip to the hardware store. I needed duct tape and a wrench to fix the motel faucet. Management didn't care much about the amenities, and I couldn't stand watching it leak all night. There, in aisle 5, I saw Jacob. Alone. He was holding a box of tiles. Didn't see me at first. I stepped into his view. "Hey, son." He flinched a little, like I'd caught him doing something wrong. "Dad." "Hey. I didn't expect, what are you doing here?" I held up the tape. "Leaky pipe." He nodded. Looked down. Wouldn't meet my eyes. We stood there, awkward. Two grown men surrounded by plumbing tools and unsaid words. "How's the family?" I asked. "They're fine," he said quickly. "Jess is busy with work. You know how it is." No, I didn't. I wasn't allowed to know anymore. "I got a call," I said. "From a lawyer." His shoulders tensed. "Yeah?" Said Jessica was looking into my financial records. "Power of attorney." He blinked. That was just precaution. She didn't mean anything by it. I stared at him. "She's trying to get into my finances, Jacob. That's not precaution. That's planning." He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "And the story about me leaving voluntarily? That I wanted to move out?" He had the decency to look ashamed. "It was easier that way." Easier. I stepped back, the words stinging more than I expected. "For you." "Dad," he reached out like he wanted to explain, but I shook my head. "I raised you better than this. Or at least, I thought I did." I turned and walked out before he could say anything else. My hand shook as I opened the truck door. Not from anger, no, not anymore. It was something colder. Something more permanent. Disappointment. A few days later, I ran into Linda from the diner again. She brought me a bag of groceries. "I've been thinking about you," she said, setting them down on the motel nightstand. "That boy of yours used to brag about you all the time. What happened?" I didn't answer right away. Just stared at the sack of bread, fruit, and instant coffee. The kind of kindness that feels like a wound. "People don't always grow up the way you hope," I finally said. "Sometimes they grow around you." She didn't press. Just gave me a soft look and left. But her words stuck. That night, I opened the metal lockbox I kept under the bed. Inside were old tax returns, insurance papers, my will, and a few letters from Marjorie. I hadn't read them since the funeral. Her handwriting danced across the paper, curly, firm, always underlined in places where she got passionate. One letter ended with, "If you ever feel lost, follow your own compass. Not anyone else's map." I sat there, holding the page like it was the last warm thing in the room. That was the night I made my decision. I wasn't going to wait for them to ruin what little I had left. I wasn't going to give them the chance to spin one more lie or twist one more document into something ugly. The next morning, I drove to a small law office in a quiet part of town. Old building, peeling paint, but the lawyer inside, Patricia, was sharp as a tack. We sat in her office, surrounded by dusty books and stacks of papers. "I want to talk about my will," I said. She nodded. "All right. What's the situation?" I told her everything. The house. The betrayal. The whispers behind closed doors. I even told her about the lawyer voicemail and my fears that they were angling for my money. Patricia didn't flinch. She'd heard worse, probably. But she listened. Carefully. "We'll start by protecting your assets," she said. "And if you're worried about them contesting anything, we can include a forfeiture clause." "A what?" "Basically," she said, "if anyone contests your will, they lose their inheritance entirely. Everything would go to a backup beneficiary." I leaned back, thinking. "Who do you want that to be?" she asked. I didn't answer for a long while. Then I said, "There's a veterans' charity. Marjorie used to volunteer there. Helped widows write job applications. She loved that place." She wrote it down. "And your son?" "Nothing," I said quietly. "Not after this." Patricia paused, then nodded. "All right. We'll draft it today." It was the hardest pen stroke I've ever made. My hand shook. My throat went dry. But when it was done, I felt something shift. A release. Not relief, no, not yet, but clarity. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing it to take back the story. Before I left her office, Patricia gave me a folder with copies of everything. I held it like it was a shield. Outside, the wind picked up. I looked at the sky, the clouds moving quick, like something was coming. And for the first time in months, I felt ready to meet it. The air in Patricia's office felt different the second time I walked in. Colder, somehow. More final. Maybe it was just me. Maybe it was the weight of what I was about to do. She greeted me with a small nod, no small talk this time. "It's all here," she said, tapping the manila folder on her desk. "Everything you asked for. I've drafted your new will, listed your assets, and included the forfeiture clause. Once you sign, it's binding." I sat down slowly. My hands were steady, but my chest was tight. Binding. That word rang in my ears. I opened the folder. My name stared back at me from the top of the page, Last Will and Testament of Harold James Bennett. I scanned the lines, reading each paragraph carefully. The house, what was left of my claim, was to be sold. Proceeds split, a small scholarship fund in Marjorie's name at her old community college, and the rest donated to the veterans' shelter she used to love. My savings, what little remained, would be left untouched by Jacob. Not a cent. And if your son contests the will, Patricia said, flipping to the clause halfway through, everything gets redirected to the charity. No appeals. No loopholes. I exhaled. Good. We sat in silence for a moment. Do you want to leave a letter with it? She asked. Some people do. Foreclosure. I thought about that. A letter. Words that might be read years after I'm gone. No, I said finally. He already knows what he did. Still, something tugged at me. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out an old photo, me, Marjorie, and little Jacob on the front porch of our first house. Summer of '91. We all looked sunburnt and happy. Marjorie was holding a lemonade. Jacob had no shirt on and 2 missing front teeth. I slid the photo into the back of the folder. Keep that with it. Patricia nodded. Then came the moment. She laid the pen in front of me. Just sign here, and here. I stared at the dotted line. My hand hovered. This was it. The final unraveling of something I'd spent a lifetime building. A statement to the world that my only son was no longer part of my legacy. I thought of Marjorie again. She would have done this sooner, I think. She always had a sharper instinct for people. I was the one who made excuses. The one who believed Jacob's silences were just stress, not indifference. The one who confused politeness from Jessica for warmth. I clung to memories long after the people in them had changed. But not anymore. I signed. It was done. Patricia slid the papers into her safe and handed me a copy. You okay? No, I said honestly. But I'm sure. We shook hands. Hers was firm. Assuring. I walked out of that office into the fading afternoon sun, clutching that folder like it was the only thing left of me that hadn't been taken. I sat in my truck and didn't turn the key right away. Just stared ahead, letting the silence wrap around me. For the first time, I didn't feel helpless. I felt in control. And that scared me more than anything. Because now there was no going back. The next few days were quiet. I stopped checking my phone. Not that it rang much. Jacob hadn't called since our conversation at the hardware store. Jessica, of course, wouldn't dare. I figured they were waiting for me to cave, to come crawling back, to ask for forgiveness I wasn't sure I even wanted anymore. I started walking every morning. Just a mile or 2. Around the industrial park behind the motel, where the weeds grew through the cracks in the pavement and the trucks roared by without slowing down. It wasn't scenic, but it cleared my head. Gave me space to think. And one morning, I walked past the realtor's office on Main Street. I froze. In the window, there it was. For sale, 83 Carver Lane. My old house. Jacob and Jessica were selling. A small fire lit in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Just something. I stepped inside. The young woman at the desk smiled. Can I help you? Just looking, I said, pointing toward the sign. That place, Carver Lane. How long's it been on the market? 4 days, she said. Foreclosure sale. Bank's handling it now. My eyebrows lifted. Foreclosure? She nodded. They refinanced too high. Missed 3 payments. I left without another word. Sat in my truck for 20 minutes. Then I called Patricia. Hypothetically, I asked, how would someone go about buying a house, anonymously? There was a pause. Are you serious? She asked. Dead serious. And I was. They took my home from me. But they didn't know I still had enough strength left to take it back. The plan wasn't revenge. Not really. It was something else. Something deeper. A reclaiming. Of dignity. Of memory. Of the promise I made to Marjorie when we first moved into that house. This will be our legacy. They may have forgotten it. But I hadn't. The email came on a Tuesday morning. The subject line read simply, "Financial clarification, urgent." It was from Jessica. I almost didn't open it. I should have deleted it right there. But something in me needed to see it. Needed to face just how far she was willing to go. It was 2 paragraphs of legal-sounding nonsense, written like she was a lawyer instead of just married to my son. It outlined how I had benefited materially from staying in their home for several months, and how, in her view, I owed them reimbursement for room, board, utilities, and food. She attached a spreadsheet. $8,490.32. I read the figure twice, then once more, slower. My stomach turned. This wasn't a joke. She was actually charging me, for living in the home I helped them buy, for the meals I cooked, for the toilet paper I bought with my own hands. Near the bottom, she included this line: "If repayment is not possible, please respond so we can discuss alternate arrangements. Legal options may be considered if communication is not received within 14 days. Alternate arrangements. Legal options." I wanted to laugh, but all that came out was a quiet groan. I was still staring at the screen when a knock came at the motel door. I opened it to find the manager holding a yellow envelope. "This came for you," he said. Guy in a suit dropped it off. Said it was important. Inside was a letter from a law firm. Not the same one Jessica had used before, but similar enough. This one informed me that the contents of the shared storage unit, one I'd been paying for since before Jacob was married, were being reviewed. Because the lease had been co-signed by my son, he was now restructuring the ownership. I read it twice before I understood what they were saying. They were taking my things. Old tools, photo albums, Marjorie's recipes, her garden tools, the folded flag from my uncle's funeral, everything I didn't have space for at the motel but couldn't bear to part with. I sat down on the edge of the bed, that cheap, creaky mattress groaning under my weight, and felt something give way in me. They weren't done. They wouldn't be done until they wrung every last drop from me, my money, my name, my memories. And once they had it all, they'd write me off like some cautionary tale about generosity gone too far. I looked around that cramped motel room. The cheap curtains. The brown carpet. The humming refrigerator that never quite kept things cold. I wasn't built for this. I had spent my life providing, building homes, fixing roofs, solving problems. This wasn't me. I stood up and opened the suitcase under the bed. Inside were the legal documents Patricia had helped me draft, along with a copy of the house listing. I ran my fingers over the cold paper. They were desperate. Selling the house meant something had gone very wrong financially. Maybe they'd lost a job, maybe the bank had finally caught up with them, but it wasn't my job to wonder anymore. What mattered was that the house was in foreclosure. And I had the means, and the right, to take it. The next morning, I walked into the bank that held the deed. The loan officer was a young man with a soft voice and the kind of smile that doesn't mean anything. "I'm interested in purchasing a property listed under foreclosure," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "Which one?" I slid the paper across the desk. He looked down. Then up. "There's still time for the original owner to negotiate a settlement," he said. "I'm aware," I replied. "But if they don't?" "We auction it," he said. "Unless there's a pre-approved cash buyer." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "I'd like to be that buyer." He asked for proof of funds. I handed him a bank statement from the account Marjorie and I had opened together when Jacob was 12. That money was supposed to be for our retirement. For long drives and sunsets and rocking chairs. Instead, it would be used to reclaim what we built. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, just like I had after they first kicked me out. But this time the thoughts weren't spinning. They were sharp. Clear. I wasn't just going to buy the house. I was going to walk into that family gathering Jessica had planned, the one I wasn't invited to, and I was going to tell them. To their faces. I had waited long enough. Bit my tongue long enough. Given second, third, and fourth chances until they became expectations. But this was the final straw. I got dressed in my best shirt the next day. The blue one Marjorie had always liked. Pressed it myself. Combed my hair. Polished my shoes. I even put on the old watch Jacob gave me on my 60th birthday, the last real gift he'd ever given me. In my coat pocket was a sealed envelope. Inside, a copy of the property transfer papers. Sale confirmed. Title cleared. Final payment made in cash. I tucked it carefully next to my chest. Felt like armor. Jessica's parents were in town, and they were hosting a birthday dinner for her father. Big crowd. Extended family. Jacob's co-workers. It was the perfect stage. I stood outside their house, my house, as guests arrived. Nobody recognized me at first. Just an old man in a pressed shirt with a quiet look in his eyes. When the porch light flicked on and the laughter spilled out into the night air, I stepped forward. One step at a time. Toward the door they thought they'd closed forever. The porch was just as I remembered it. Same wood panels I laid down with Jacob one summer, sweating under the July sun. Same chipped corner Jessica always said she'd get someone to fix. They never did. I stood there for a moment, hearing the muffled voices from inside, clinking glasses, someone laughing too loudly. Their life had gone on without me, clean and uninterrupted. But not for long. I knocked. Silence. Then the door opened. Jessica stood in front of me, wine glass in hand, mouth frozen mid-smile. "What are you?" she started, but her voice caught. "I need to speak to Jacob," I said, my voice calm, steady. Her eyes narrowed. "This isn't a good time." Behind her, I could hear the music, smell roasted meat and candles. Guests were gathered around the table, plates full, faces glowing under the chandelier. I stepped past her. She didn't stop me. In the dining room, forks paused mid-air. Conversations died mid-sentence. Jacob looked up from his seat at the head of the table and blinked like he wasn't sure I was real. "Dad," he said, confused, almost cautious. "Happy birthday to your father-in-law," I said, nodding to the guests. "Sorry to interrupt." Jessica appeared behind me, tense as a stretched wire. "I won't take long," I continued, pulling the envelope from my coat pocket. I placed it gently in front of Jacob's plate. "You might want to open that." He looked around the room, trying to maintain composure. But his hands trembled as he peeled the seal. Silence fell again. Everyone watching. Jacob unfolded the papers. His face drained of color. Jessica leaned over his shoulder, scanned the page, then jerked upright like she'd been burned. "You're lying." "No," I said softly. "I bought the house. From the bank. Last week." Murmurs rippled through the room like a wave breaking. "You can't," Jessica started, reaching for the papers. "I paid cash," I said. "They gave me the keys this morning." Jacob looked at me, panic rising in his voice. "You didn't, you wouldn't do that." "You made it easy," I said. "You put it on the market. You missed your payments." "I just followed your lead." He pushed back from the table and stood. "This isn't fair. We have a family." "So did I," I replied. Until you decided I was just a bill you couldn't afford. Jessica stepped in now, voice low and furious. This is revenge. You're trying to humiliate us. No, I said. You did that yourselves. I'm just here to reclaim what you threw away. A woman near the end of the table, Jessica's cousin, maybe, whispered something. Another man leaned toward his wife, wide-eyed. It was spreading. The truth was finally out. Jacob walked toward me, hands open, like he was trying to calm an animal. Dad, please, can we talk in private? No, I said. Everything you did was behind closed doors. This part happens in the light. Jessica took a deep breath, trying to regain her control. We'll fight this. You think you can just take it back? You already gave it up, I replied. I'm just the one who noticed. Jacob looked at the guests. Some were staring down at their plates, awkward. Others looked between us, fascinated. Embarrassment painted his face. I didn't want this, he muttered. Neither did I said. And with that, I turned. Walked back toward the door I'd been pushed out of once before. This time, on my own terms. I paused in the hallway. There was a photo on the wall, Jessica, Jacob, their daughter. Taken in the backyard. The swing set I built was just visible in the background. I reached out and gently straightened the frame before walking out the door. Outside, the air was crisp. Night had fallen. I didn't expect him to follow, but he did. Wait, Jacob said, catching up on the porch. What happens now? I looked at him for a long moment. That's up to you. You've got 30 days. After that, I'm changing the locks. He opened his mouth. Closed it. You're serious? I nodded. I gave you everything once. You turned me into a stranger in my own life. I won't do that again. He rubbed his hands through his hair, eyes glassy. I was trying to protect my family. So was I said. But I didn't protect myself. Or your mother's memory. I didn't wait for a response. I walked to my truck, opened the door, and climbed in. As I pulled away, I saw him still standing there, silhouetted in the porch light, watching me go, not with anger, not with hatred, but with something worse. Regret. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The house was quiet when I returned. Not empty, no, it had furniture, curtains, even a few appliances left behind, but it was quiet in the way a place becomes when its meaning has been stripped away. I stepped inside slowly, letting the door close behind me. My footsteps echoed faintly. The carpet had been replaced since I left, but the creak in the floorboard by the hallway closet was still there. Some things don't change. Others change so completely, you barely recognize them. The silence was loud. I walked through each room deliberately. The living room where I used to read the paper. The kitchen where Marjorie and I danced once, laughing to some old Motown song playing off the radio. The spot by the window where the high chair used to be, back when I was babysitting my granddaughter during Jessica's long shifts. Gone. All of it. Only ghosts now. I climbed the stairs, hand trailing along the banister I once stained and sealed with Jacob, back when he still listened to me. At the top, the door to what used to be his childhood bedroom was slightly ajar. Inside, it had become a home office, cold, functional, lifeless. But then I opened the door to the guest room. And there it was. My old suitcase. Still the same one. I knew the scratches on the handle. The little tear by the zipper where the fabric had frayed. I walked up to it, knelt down. It was empty. But the sight of it, sitting in that room like a cruel joke, stirred something in my chest I couldn't quite name. I left it there. I went back downstairs and sat on the couch, took in the quiet. No voices. No accusations. No tension. Just stillness. And for the first time in months, it wasn't loneliness I felt. It was peace. The town, of course, had already started buzzing. Word travels fast in small places, especially when the story's good. By the time I walked into the diner the next morning, the whispering had already begun. Linda handed me coffee before I even sat down. "I heard," she said gently. I nodded. "Good," she added, with a firmness that surprised me. People approached me differently after that. Not everyone. Some neighbors looked away, awkward and unsure. Others gave small nods or short, tight smiles, not quite approval, but a quiet acknowledgement. A few old friends even stopped by the house, pretending they just happened to be in the neighborhood. I didn't correct them. Still, the quiet was thick in those first few days. Not the kind of silence that hurts, though. It was something else. Like the moment right after a storm, when the wind finally stops and you're left standing among the broken branches, just taking it all in. I spent hours walking the neighborhood, nodding at dogs and waving at joggers. One afternoon, I passed the little garden bed Marjorie used to tend. It had gone wild. Overgrown. I knelt down, cleared some weeds, loosened the soil. It felt good. One evening, as I sat on the porch sipping coffee, a familiar voice broke the quiet. "Mr. Bennett?" I turned. It was Emma, the teenage girl who used to live across the street. She was grown now, maybe 20, holding a sketchpad under her arm. "I heard what happened," she said. "You bought the house back?" I nodded. "That's right." She looked down at her shoes. "Good." Then, after a pause, she added, "I used to love coming over here when I was little. Your wife used to let me pick tomatoes." I smiled. She loved that garden more than she loved most people. Emma laughed softly. "You gonna plant again?" "Maybe," I said. "Thinking about doing more than that." She tilted her head. "Like what?" I didn't answer right away. Because I didn't know. Not yet. But something was forming. An idea, a feeling. This house didn't have to stay empty. Didn't have to be a monument to pain. It could be something more. That night, I went through the old boxes Jacob hadn't touched. Inside one, I found Marjorie's recipe cards. Her handwriting, faded but still strong. I ran my fingers over the ink. She always said that food brought people together better than sermons or speeches. Maybe it still could. A few days later, a knock came at the door. I opened it to find a man in a navy windbreaker. Balding, kind eyes. "Name's Frank," he said. "I run the veterans group over on Maple. Heard you've got some space now." I nodded, still unsure where this was going. He glanced behind me. "We've been looking for a place. Not permanent, just a spot to gather. Most of our guys are older, can't handle cold basements anymore." I didn't answer right away. Just stepped aside and let him in. He walked through slowly, respectfully. Took in the space. Nodded. "We'd clean up after ourselves," he said. "Bring our own chairs, if we need to. Just need a place where folks don't feel like they're in the way." I looked around at the quiet house. My house. Marjorie would have liked this idea. "Let's try it," I said. Frank smiled. "You sure?" "Yeah," I said. "This house is meant to be used. Not locked up." As he left, I stood in the doorway, watching him go. Something loosened in my chest. I wasn't just reclaiming space anymore. I was rebuilding purpose. One small choice at a time. The first time the veterans came by, they were polite to a fault, as if stepping into my home was an imposition, not an invitation. I recognized it instantly. That same old habit of apologizing just for existing, for taking up space. It was the same way I felt sitting in that motel room, eating crackers for dinner and pretending it didn't bother me. I wasn't about to let anyone else feel like that here. "Come in, don't be shy," I told the first man through the door. Big guy named Ray. Vietnam vet. He looked around the living room like it was a church and he'd forgotten to take off his hat. "You sure this is all right?" he asked. "Ray, I've had louder ghosts in this place," I said. "And better company is always welcome." That got a chuckle. A real one. They started coming by twice a week. A dozen men, sometimes more. They brought folding chairs, thermoses of strong coffee, even a battered radio that played nothing but old blues. We pushed the furniture back and sat in a circle in the living room where Jacob once opened birthday presents. They talked about everything. War stories. Grandkids. Bad backs and lost pensions. I didn't say much at first, just listened. But eventually, someone asked why I had the space, why a man my age lived alone in a 4-bedroom house. I told them the truth. Not the tabloids and whispers version floating around town. My version. I told them about Jacob. About Jessica. About the motel room and the job I lost. About the silence I sat in for months while my own son turned into someone I barely recognized. And I told them about Marjorie. About how we built this home together. How she used to make tomato soup from scratch and give away jars to neighbors, just because kindness didn't need a reason. The room went quiet. Ray nodded. Another man named Lenny muttered, "That's family for you." We didn't say much more after that. But something changed that day. They saw me not just as a man with a spare room, but as one of them. Someone who'd taken a few too many hits and decided to stand up anyway. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and looked around. The room still held shadows of its former life, Jessica's carefully labeled spice jars, a faded family sign above the stove. But it didn't feel like their kitchen anymore. It felt like mine. I pulled out a notebook and started making a list. Marjorie's house, that was what I wrote at the top. It just came out of me. Like the name had always been there, waiting for me to notice. Under it, I wrote. Monday and Thursday, Veterans Meeting. Pantry donation box. Reading corner for kids, maybe get bookshelves. Spare bedroom crisis housing. Porch garden restoration. Marjorie's soup night, monthly. By the time I stopped writing, the page was nearly full. I stared at it, hands resting on the table, heart beating a little faster than usual. Not out of fear, out of purpose. I had a new plan. The next day, I called Patricia and asked what I needed to do to start a nonprofit. She chuckled. "You don't waste time, do you?" "Wasted enough," I said. She walked me through the steps, forms, registration, a board of some kind. I told her I'd figure it out. I always had. I wasn't trying to run a company. Just trying to open a door that had been slammed shut too many times. Then I called Emma, the young artist from across the street. "I need help making this place look less like a memory," I said. "Think you can paint something for the front?" She showed up the next afternoon with brushes and a sketchbook. "What exactly do you want it to say?" she asked. Marjorie's house, in big letters. But warm. Inviting. Not fancy. She thought for a second. "What about sunflowers?" "Marjorie's favorite." I smiled. Perfect. Over the next few weeks, the transformation began. We cleared out the upstairs bedrooms, patched holes in the drywall, scrubbed the baseboards until the original white peeked through again. Volunteers came, some veterans, some neighbors, even a few local kids who just wanted community service hours. I didn't care why they came. Only that they showed up. We planted a small garden in the backyard. Tomatoes, basil, rosemary. I taught a few of the younger ones how to build raised beds. They laughed when I made them measure twice, cut once. Every little thing reminded me of Marjorie. And somehow, that didn't hurt anymore. It felt like she was here. In every laugh, every hammer tap, every pot of soup we made for folks who didn't have much else. Jacob never called. Jessica never showed up. Their silence was a gift, honestly. It left me room to rebuild without having to look over my shoulder. But one day, about a month into it all, I saw a car parked across the street. Same old sedan Jacob used to drive. It didn't pull in. Just idled there for a while before driving off. I said nothing. Whatever he needed to see, he saw. This house, once a monument to my failure, was becoming something new. Something stronger. It wasn't about taking back what they stole anymore. It was about giving something to people who'd never had it to begin with. A safe place. A warm meal. A seat at the table. Marjorie's house was coming to life. And for the first time in a long, long time. So was I. Marjorie's house opened its doors on a chilly Monday morning in early spring. We didn't have a ribbon-cutting ceremony, no mayor or press or fancy speeches. Just a fresh coat of paint, a new hand-painted sign out front, and a kettle of Marjorie's tomato soup simmering on the stove. That was enough. The first to arrive were the regulars, Ray, Lenny, and a few of the other veterans who now treated the place like home. They showed up early, helped set out chairs, and argued about where to hang the American flag someone had donated. Then came the unexpected ones. A young woman with 2 kids clinging to her sides, eyes wary but grateful. Said her landlord raised the rent overnight and she had nowhere else to go. We set her up in one of the spare rooms, just a mattress, a blanket, and a little lamp that once sat by Marjorie's reading chair. She cried when she saw it. Not out of pity, but relief. A man named Carlos came next. Middle-aged, soft-spoken. Said he'd been sleeping in his truck after losing his job. He spent the whole afternoon scrubbing the back patio, then asked if he could help cook next time. We didn't call them guests. We called them neighbors. And slowly, the house filled up. Some came for food. Others for company. A few came just to sit in silence around people who understood what it meant to lose something, or someone, and start again. The smell of soup, fresh bread, and coffee became part of the walls. Laughter echoed in rooms that had once held nothing but awkward silences and withheld judgment. The kitchen was busy, messy, alive. And I was too. Every morning I woke up with a reason. I swept floors, folded linens, boiled water, fixed broken knobs and door hinges. My body ached at the end of the day, but the kind of ache that means something. Purpose, not punishment. One night, as I was locking up, I noticed a small envelope left on the entry table. No name. Just, "Thank you," scribbled on the front. Inside was a folded note: "You gave us a place when we had nothing. You reminded us what family can look like. Thank you for making room for strangers. We don't feel like strangers anymore." I sat down on the bottom stair and read it 3 times. That night, I dreamed of Marjorie. She was in the garden, her hands in the dirt, wearing that ridiculous sun hat she always insisted made her look bohemian. She turned to me and smiled, didn't say a word, just smiled like she already knew. In the mornings, I started leaving the front door open a crack. Just enough so people knew they could walk in without knocking. They always did. A young couple showed up one afternoon, both covered in paint. Art students from the community college. Asked if they could paint a mural on the backyard fence. What kind of mural? I asked. Something hopeful, they said. I pointed to the shed where Marjorie kept her brushes. Supplies are in there. By the end of the week, the back fence was a riot of color, flowers blooming from concrete, hands reaching out to lift each other, a warm sun rising behind a crooked house that looked suspiciously like ours. Neighbors started stopping by just to see it. Even the local high school asked if their students could host a poetry night in the living room. I said yes. We served cookies and lemonade and watched teenagers read shaky verses about heartbreak and hope while their parents cried softly in the back row. It wasn't blood that filled that house. It was something better. Respect. Gratitude. Connection. Real family. Some nights, I'd sit on the porch with Ray or Linda from the diner, watching the lights inside flicker through the windows as people laughed, argued over board games, shared stories. "This place has legs now," Ray said one evening, puffing on a pipe. "It's walking again." I nodded. "It's not mine anymore. It belongs to all of them." He looked at me. "Still got your name on the deed though." I smiled. "Names don't mean much. Actions do." One afternoon, I heard the gate creak and saw a small figure standing at the edge of the driveway. My granddaughter. She was taller now, maybe 10 or 11, hair longer, glasses slipping down her nose. She looked unsure, like she wasn't sure if she should even be there. "Grandpa?" she asked. I stood there frozen for a second. "Hey there, sweetheart." "My mom doesn't know I came," she said quickly. "I was at my friend's house. I told them I was going for a walk." I stepped aside. "You want to come in?" She nodded and walked in slowly, looking around. "It smells the same," she said. "Like soup and wood polish." I chuckled. "Some things don't change." She paused in the hallway. "Why doesn't my dad talk about you?" That one caught me. I knelt beside her. "Sometimes people don't know how to fix what they broke." She nodded slowly, like she understood more than her age should have allowed. "I miss you," she said. "I remember the swing set." "I remember building it," I said. "Took 3 days and a sprained thumb." She smiled. "Can I come back?" "Anytime you want." She stayed for an hour. Helped peel carrots, played a board game with one of the kids staying upstairs, then gave me the tightest hug I'd felt in years before leaving. That night, I stared at the photo of Marjorie on the mantel. "We lost something," I whispered, "but I think we found something better." She didn't answer, of course. But I could feel it. She was proud. Marjorie's house wasn't just a home again. It was a heartbeat. A place where the forgotten were remembered. Where strangers became kin. And where I finally learned. Family isn't just who you raise. It's who rises with you. It was late afternoon, the sky a hazy shade of gold, when I heard the knock. Not the usual soft tap of a neighbor or the excited bang of a kid looking for snacks. This one was hesitant. Measured. Like whoever was on the other side wasn't sure they wanted to be there. I wiped my hands on a towel, I'd just finished setting up chairs for movie night, and opened the door. There he stood. Jacob. Thinner than I remembered. A little grayer at the temples. Same nervous way of standing, weight shifting between feet like he was looking for an escape hatch. He held nothing. No box, no flowers, no apology gift. Just a pair of empty hands and a face weighed down by things unsaid. "Hey," he said quietly. I nodded. "Jacob." He looked past me into the house. You've done something here." "I've tried." He swallowed. "I heard about the nonprofit. The veterans. The mural in the back. News travels." We stood there for a long moment in the doorway. Neither of us moved. "I was driving by," he said. "Figured I'd stop. Just for a minute." "You can come in," I said. "If you're not here to ask for anything." He hesitated, then stepped inside. I led him to the living room, not the formal one we never used, but the lived-in one, where chairs didn't match and the couch had been repaired with duct tape more than once. He sat on the edge of it like he wasn't sure it would hold him. He looked around, eyes scanning the walls, the bookshelf, the old coffee table Marjorie found at a yard sale years ago. "You kept the same clock," he said. "I never liked digital ones." Another long pause. "I saw Lily," he added. "She told me she came by. Said you let her help in the kitchen. She's got your mother's stubbornness." He smiled faintly. "She does." Silence again. Not the heavy kind we used to share in that house when the air was thick with judgment. This was something different. More like a stillness between two people on opposite shores of the same river. Jacob reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "I wrote something. I didn't reach for it." "It's not an excuse," he said quickly. "Just a few things I needed to say." "You can say them now," I said. He nodded slowly, folding the paper back. "I was scared. When you lost the job, when you moved in. I didn't know how to handle it. Jessica, she never wanted you here. She thought it would be temporary. I didn't stand up for you because I didn't want to lose what I thought I had." "And what did you think you had?" I asked. He looked down. "Control. A family. Stability. But none of it was real. And I didn't see that until it was too late." He looked up again, eyes glassy. "I shouldn't have let you go the way I did." "No," I said. "You shouldn't have." He nodded. "You were always there for me. Every single time I needed something. And when you needed help, I treated you like a liability. Like something I could discard. You did." His voice cracked. "I regret it. I let that sit in the air." He rubbed his palms together. "I've tried to fix things with Lily. She still talks about the swing set. About Marjorie's soup. About the way you used to tell her bedtime stories like you believed every word. She's a good kid," I said. "She's welcome here. Always." "And me?" I looked at him. For a long time, I dreamed about this moment. Him showing up, broken, humble. Hoping for redemption. And I used to imagine I'd give him a second chance, that I'd sweep the pain away in a single embrace, like some kind of movie ending. But this wasn't a movie. This was real. And real wounds don't heal just because someone says sorry. "You're not unwelcome," I said carefully. "But I'm not the man you left behind in that basement. I'm not waiting anymore." He nodded slowly. "I understand." He stood up, lingered near the door. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "But I hope someday you'll believe I meant it." I didn't say anything. He opened the door, then paused again. "This house," he said. "You brought it back to life." "No," I replied. "They did." He smiled faintly. "Still, she would have been proud." I looked out at the street, then back at him. "She is." And then he left. Didn't look back. I stood in the doorway for a while, watching the sun slip behind the trees. Inside, I heard laughter, someone telling a story in the kitchen, the clink of dishes being washed, a kettle whistling. The world didn't stop because of his visit. And that was the gift. I walked back in and joined the others. Because this was my home now. Not because I owned it. But because I finally understood what it meant to belong. Speech balloon. Have you ever had to teach someone a lesson through silence? Share your story in the comments. The day we hung the new sign, the whole street showed up. It was hand-painted, sunflowers on either side, letters curved with care, Marjorie's house. Emma had sealed it with weatherproofing herself, and Ray, bless him, climbed the ladder with knees that creaked like an old porch swing just to help mount it above the front door. The wind picked up just as we stepped back to admire it, rustling the leaves like Marjorie was giving her approval. Linda from the diner brought cookies. Carlos handled the lemonade. The veterans brought folding chairs and stood tall like it was a ceremony, even though no one called it one. It just felt like the right thing to do. We didn't need speeches, but someone handed me a microphone anyway. I wasn't sure what to say. I stood there, sunlight warming my shoulders, looking at the crowd gathered on the front lawn. Kids sitting cross-legged. Old folks leaning on canes. Teens with paint-stained jeans. And in the very back, standing under a maple tree like she wasn't sure if she should step closer, my granddaughter, Lily. I cleared my throat. This house has been through a lot. People quieted. It's seen joy. Pain. Laughter. And loss. It's held babies, arguments, grief, and grace. And for a long time, it sat heavy with the weight of what went wrong. I paused, looked up at the sign. But now, it holds something new. Not because I made it that way. But because you did. All of you. I saw Ray nod. Emma smile. Linda dab her eyes. This isn't just a building anymore. It's a second chance. A warm seat. A pot of soup on the stove. It's everything my wife, Marjorie, believed a home should be. I could feel the lump in my throat but kept going. She used to say, if you've got a roof, you've got room for someone else. I didn't always understand that. I do now. Applause rose, gentle but firm. Like the walls themselves were clapping. Afterward, Lily came up to me with a sketch in her hand, the mural from the back fence, drawn in pencil. She'd added something new, a swing set in the corner, with a little girl and an old man, hand in hand. I made it in class, she said. My teacher said it looked like home. I looked down at her, heart swelling. It does. She looked up. Can I come help on Saturdays? You can help any time you want. Inside, things were buzzing again. The veterans set up folding tables for writing workshops. A young woman named Kendra from the community college asked if she could start hosting cooking classes on Wednesdays. We set up a lending library by the stairs, using 2 old shelves someone donated from their garage. Every room had a new purpose. One became a tutoring nook for kids who struggled in school. Another, a quiet space for people who just needed to sit and breathe. We had a wall of photos now, snapshots of volunteers, neighbors, kids with messy hands holding paintbrushes. In the center was a framed picture of Marjorie in her garden, laughing with a sun hat on and tomato stains on her gloves. It was the heartbeat of the house. People started calling it the porch that never closes. Someone was always there, fixing something, reading, just being. I got more visitors than I ever did when I lived here with Jacob. Funny how that works. Strangers felt safer here than my own family once did. But maybe that's what happens when you open your door without asking what someone can give in return. One night, I sat in the backyard under the stars, a blanket over my knees, the spring air cool and clean. Ray was beside me, humming an old war song. Carlos passed around mugs of tea. Emma sat on the porch sketching by lamplight. I looked around and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not victory. Not revenge. Not even justice. Peace. Jacob hadn't come back. He hadn't called. But Lily did. Every weekend. She helped with cleanup, played board games with the residents, and once brought me a loaf of banana bread she baked herself. And that was enough.